Hey, how's it going? And today I decided to do a basic intro into LightWave, the software program in general. I realized there's only a couple tutorials and some of them are kind of old, so I just thought we would do a project which is a spinning box in the sky. I know a lot of times, sometimes people make a donut or something like that, but I just thought I would do a spinning box in the sky and then kind of walk you through how to get started and share some things as I go. LightWave's actually three programs. It's Modeler, and then there's a hub, and then there's layout, and that's different from a lot of programs. There's some backstory about why it is that way, but I actually like it that way. So right now we're in Modeler. You can think of Modeler as the workshop, and then when you're done modeling, then you take it into layout, which is basically, I look at layout as the sound stage, and that's where you bring all these things that you've created together and then animate them and light them and surface them. And you also can do surfacing in Modeler. So Modeler is primarily, as the name says, for modeling and surfacing, and then layout is for putting it all together. So I actually spend quite a bit of time in layout. I probably spend 90% of my time in layout and maybe only 10% not into modeling that much. So a lot of times I can just go to TurboSquid and get a model. So there's no need for me to model something that's already made or I can get for free. So when you first open it, you're confronted with this window, and it takes you a while to get your mind around this, but basically you have four views. In the upper left, you've got a top view. The lower left, you got a back view and a wireframe, and then you've got perspective. And then each window, in these three windows, and the ones where you clearly see this grid, I'm going to go over this navigation. This is very important. There's little tiny icons on here, and they're all very important, and they're all doing something. Just real general, I'm not going to walk through everything. You do need to know how to navigate, and this is your up and down control, this is your perspective, and this is your zoom. And then this button makes it full screen, so if you want to just look at everything full screen and not be bothered with all these windows, you could just make this window big and work in this view. And then if you wanted to see it from others' perspective, you just click it again. And then up here are layers. You can work in layers, and then it seems confusing because the layer has this diagonal, and all that means is that when you click the lower half of that box, you're putting things into the background so you can see it, but you can't affect it. And then one thing that will help you on your LightWave journey, getting started on LightWave, is just knowing how to navigate and maybe some basic commands, shortcut keys that I'll explain. And then up here, there's all these tabs, and each tab has a bunch of tools associated with it, and you don't need me to walk through and explain what all these are. You can just click and see. But this part of the menu on the left never changes. It always stays the same. So each tab has a set of tools associated with it. Here on the first tab, the very first tab, and it kind of follows a workflow actually as you go. There's a logic behind how the default is set up. But what we're going to do for today is just make a box. So all you have to do is come over here on the left and click on box, left click, and then you can start it in any view, but I find it most helpful to start in the top view, and this is on the y-axis looking down at it. And whatever axis you're looking down, you don't have access to that axis. So like if I'm looking at this from the top on the y-axis, you'll notice over here that I can only move on the x and z. So as we're looking down the y-axis, if I click and drag, I'm creating the object on the x and z axes, and you can look over in the perspective view and see what's going on. You'll also notice that when I hit the box to activate it, it made the icon into a little box. And this was a very frustrating little touchy point for me. But see, we've only built the box in two axes, so right now we can save it, but it's only going to be a plane. But if I come to the back view and I click and drag, you can see in the perspective I've made a box. Now this is one of the most important things, is that the box, and this confused the hell out of me when I started LightWave. I thought, hey, I made the box, I can just go on and do something else. No, you haven't made the box yet. Not until you drop the tool. So you see this icon, not until I hit the space bar is the model created. So right now if I click anywhere, that box will go away. I'm not going to do that. So you have to just hit spacebar or enter to drop the tool. So you hear LightWave saying that, drop the tool, drop the tool. So they're meaning make your object. So you hit spacebar and you drop the tool. Now the box is made. So now if I just hit the delete button, I could delete it. If we come down here to the lower left, you can see that on any object we can select it by points, by edges, or position. And so if I just click here on polygon, you can see I can click the side of that box. If I hold down shift, I can select more. If I want to deselect something, I just click on it again. See that? You have to play around with it and get comfortable. It's surprisingly simple once you just get past these initial concepts. If I wanted to select a point, I click on point, and the same thing. I got 1 point. If I clicked another point, it won't select. And you'll think, hey, this piece of crap program is broken. No, it's not. You have to just hold shift, and then you can select those points. And then you'll be like, well, how the hell do I delete the point? You just click on it again. It's really simple, but it's just practicing and getting familiar with that. But we're not going to be selecting anything in this particular tutorial. Now the last thing is, every object usually has a numeric panel associated with it, but after the box is created, you can't manipulate the box numerically. So let me show you one more thing. So let me also show you. I'll close that box. So now if I hit delete, the whole box is going to go away. Can I bring it back? Yes, I can hit Control Z and bring it back. So sometimes LightWave will forgive you. Sometimes it won't. Sometimes you can control your Z yourself back into existence, and sometimes you can't. But let me just go ahead and delete this box and build another one real quick. So we click here. You'll see the box icon on the cursor. I click and drag in top view, and I click over here in the back view, and you can see the box. Now with the tool activated, the box is still under construction. So if I come over here to numeric, now I have access to these things. And let's say I want this box to be exactly the same size. So I want the width, height, and depth to be the same. I can just enter those numbers. So let's say I'll just say 3 tab 3 hit tab 3 oops 63 3 enter, and now the box is perfectly symmetrical, even on all sides, and that's what I want. So I can close this and then hit spacebar or enter to drop the tool. Now the box is perfectly created. So now you'll notice that it's resting on this grid. So technically, now that the box is built, I don't need these other windows, so I can make this a full-size window and make it look like other 3D programs. Now there's another important shortcut key to know, and that's A. If you hit A, you can make the box fill the frame. And I will go back to the 4 view and hit A again, and you can see. And if I come to my zoom tool, I can zoom in and out. Now what I'm doing is, if you click on this is the up and down. You click and drag. So on your mouse pad, I'm just clicking and dragging up and down. Here I'm going left and right. If I click the next control, I can perspective. I just stay on that tool. You keep your cursor in that position. You can go all the way around it. And then this last one is zoom in and out. So, but you hold your cursor on. You keep your cursor on that box as you're clicking and dragging. So we can zoom out. Now there's a lot more to the program. I'm just giving you a quick overview of how to navigate around and make a simple box. So now we've made a box, we should be all excited. It's a good idea to come over here to save and just save your object. We'll just call it box 2 and go save. And now we've got a box. Now that we can begin surfacing this box here in Modeler, but we can also do that in layout. As I said earlier, this is the modeler portion of the program. There's the layout portion. And to get there, all we have to do is come up here and click this. This is a button you'll be going to all the time. Is up here in the far upper right corner. You click and you can send the object to layout. And it'll do that for you automatically. So but before I do that, I'm going to show you one other thing. we can assign surfaces to our objects. Like if I wanted to make one side of this box appear a certain way and another side of this box appear another way, I would come down here to polygon and click on the surface I wanted, and by hitting the keyboard shortcut Q, I could just assign this one name, like I could call it front side, and go okay. It's not going to hurt anything if I do that. Now I've just specifically assigned a surface just to that area. All the other surfaces will be default. Now once I've selected something, if I want to deselect, I can you just click away from it, like on a gray area up here on the top, and it deselects everything. So now anyway, I'm going to go ahead and just click here and send the object to layout. So now we got our box, and it takes a couple seconds, but now we're in the layout portion of the program, and now there is our box. Now when you come into layout, there's quite a lot to go over here, but I'm really giving you a shortcut. There's always a camera and these two lights. The environment light is a new light, and it's basically, you can think of it as an alternative background. And then the direct light, which mimics the sun. So no matter how I move this light, click on the object in layout, I can just click and grab it like this. You can also manipulate it by dragging these controls down here, but you can just grab it in the scene. Actually, once an object's activated, you don't need to grab on these. You can grab anywhere and just click and drag. I don't have to be clicked on the object. It took me a long time to realize that too. But you can also grab on that particular thing as well. So there's a lot of ways to easily get around. LightWave really is a click and drag system. I mean, you can really click and drag your way through the whole thing. And then of course there is our camera. Now something that's very important is right now we're in the perspective view, and we have full access to these controls that let us look around. So usually I'm in perspective, and you can see there's the horizon and there's our grid, and it's our whole 3D world right here. We can see our camera, we can see our lights. So if I wanted to see what's going on with this, to get to its properties, I come down here on the bottom, and I would go to light, and then it says environment light. That's this light here, and I would go click on properties, and then it tells me what color the light is. Actually, what it's telling me right now is that it's kind of using this background to help light the scene. But if I click this off, then the environmental light is essentially not lighting anything. It's adding no light to the scene. It takes a little while to get your mind around that. And like I said, so you have two lights in every scene. Now, as you're looking at this is important up here, is that this gives you different ways of looking at the object. So right now we're in the perspective view, which is they also call OpenGL. So this isn't what it's going to look like when we go to render it. If we want to see what it's going to look like when we go to render it, we got to come over here and click VPR. And then we can see what this is going to look like if I go to render it. If I come over here in the perspective view, I'm in perspective, and I click on this and click and drag. I'm clicking and dragging down, I'm pulling it. You can see the basic default backdrop, and that backdrop is over here, and if you double click it, you can change the colors. So like if I wanted to make the sky bluer, I just click this and make it a dark blue. And if I wanted to make the sky black, the ground black, I could just click this, click black, go OK, and make the ground black. And then if I wanted to add more of the horizon will always be a solid line. If I wanted to make it so that you'll never be able to really gradiate, if that's a word, the horizon. But if I hit ground squeeze, I can put a gradient between these two and create a really cool effect. So if I click and drag, you'll see how that's making a gradient now on the ground plane between the black and the white color, and I can do the same thing on the sky. And then of course the horizon line itself is going to be white. So it gives you a nice view. So there's our box, and let's say I said we wanted to spin it in the sky. So this is important down here. You've always got to make sure your object, what your objects you're selected on. You can just click on the object in the scene, but notice you can't do it in VPR. So you'd have to come out of VPR, go into texture shaded. Now I can click on the camera or That's one way to select, is just by clicking on the object on the screen. But I usually select the object down here because there could be a bunch of objects in the scene and you don't want to get confused. So I come to object, and there's the box that we recreated, and so I know I'm on the box. And then of course if I click here, it's going to tell me all the properties associated with that box and things like that. Like it has 8 polygons and stuff like that. So if I want to raise the box in the sky, I can just click and drag it up like that. So like, let's say I'll raise it to there. Now just to add a surface, let's say I want to add a surface, I would go back into VPR so I could see it, and then I would go into the surface editor, and you see how we name that one polygon. I can just assign a surface, a customized surface, just to that polygon because I assigned it in Modeler. Where it says default, that's going to affect all the other polygons, the other 7. So to assign a surface, it's really easy. You just go to, you select it here, and you go, and you can actually, if you want to assign the same surface to multiple selections or assignments, you just hold down Shift and click them both. Then we can go into the Edit Node Graph. We can make this window big, and we can just click and drag this over here. And we can go to let's just grab checkerboard here. And if I double click it, I can change the colors on the checkerboard and go white. If you select a surface and you don't see it on the object, chances are you need to scale it. The scaling might be off. So it may not be lining up with your object, so you just need to adjust the scale size, and you do that just by clicking and dragging. So now all we're going to do is just drag color into color, and now I'm going to minimize this window, come back in here, minimize this window, and there is our box in the sky. Now to animate this, all we have to do is click on this playhead, drag it all the way to the end, the 120th frame. If I wanted to spin for longer, I would just come to the end frame here, hit 240, and now I got 240 frames, so I could just keep dragging it all the way down. And then what we would do is we will render this out. We'll create a folder on our desktop, and we're going to render out 240 individual frames of this in motion. So to get this moving, all we got to do is make sure we're on the object. We can come out of VPR or just click down here and select it. So like if I wanted to select the camera, I just click here. I want to select the lights, I click there, and then I choose from here. So it's always mindful. I use this because this way I can select an object while I'm in VPR. I can't click on the screen and select the object in VPR. So that's why I'm always down here. You'll be spending a lot of time down here. If I go back to object again, make sure I'm on the box. If I come over here, this is basically, we have our scaling, our position, and our rotation. That's pretty standard in 3D programs. And if I just click turn the scroll wheel, I can kind of go through all the different options here. So I want to go to rotation, and LightWave refers to the HBP as heading, pitch, and bank, and you can play around with those to see what they mean. So, but we want the heading, and all I can do is just click and drag this and start the box spinning. Now I can just click and keep dragging on that, or I can just enter a numeric value. But now I've already animated the scene. So if I hit play, I see the box spinning. So all we need to do now would be just to render this out. Now I notice as it's spinning, I don't see the checkerboards here. So that means that when I selected these surfaces, for some reason, it didn't put the checkerboard in here. So all I got to do, there's a lot of problem solving you got to do sometimes, but it's usually the program's not broken, it's just you don't know where something is. So all I got to do is right click, copy this, close that, go back, click on this surface, right click and paste it. Or I could have hit Control V to paste and just plug this in, and now you'll see there's checkerboards all the way around. Now if I want to, let's say I want this to be a little bit brighter, I could come in here to the lights, and that's the environment light. Did I turn that off? Let me see. No, it's still on. So I can increase the light intensity here, and this is, look what's happening. It changes the environment quite a bit. Let's see how I'm brightening up the scene and it's affecting the box. Then I can also go to the distant light, which you can't really see, but you can also, if I'm on the distant light, I can also increase the intensity of that, see? And then if I want to change the position of the distant light, you can only change really the heading, because it's mimicking like the sun in the sky. So if you hit heading, you see how I'm lining up different sides or even multiple sides of our spinning box. Now to render this out, all we have to do is just come up here to the render tab, and we just click render properties, and this will go to output tab here. And there's by default, LightWave has its own pathway set up, but I usually turn that off, and here I would just click this folder, and then I could assign it to any place I wanted. So I usually put it on my desktop, and so I would just select the location where to save out the file, and it should say if it's a PNG sequence, which it will be, and that's what it says it's going to be right up here, then it's going to be 240 pictures. So you don't want that. You definitely want those images in a folder, not scattered across your desktop. So then all I'd have to do, if I just want to render out a single frame, I click render frame, and then it renders out a picture. Oh, one last thing. We are looking at this image from the perspective view, so which is not necessarily the same as how the camera's positioned right now. So to see how the camera's looking at this, we would have to go into camera view, and now that's going to show us what's going to render out. Well, obviously we don't want that. So what we can do is we just go back into perspective view, and if I come over here and click match viewport perspective to selected camera, now I've matched the camera to the perspective. So if I come over here and I click camera view, now that's what it's going to render out. Now what I can do is it can also change the format in which I'm rendering out. So if I click on camera and go to properties, there's a bunch of options to choose from here, but I can put it into 1920 by 1080. So now I'm going to get that 16 by 9 perspective. So that's why it's always important to match your perspective to the camera view, because once you're in camera view, you can't really navigate around. You lose your navigation controls. The only thing you can really do is zoom in or out. So that's why you're always usually in perspective view, so that you have your navigation tools. But then you want to match your perspective once you like what you see to the camera. Then when you go into camera to see what you're actually rendering, you got an idea of what you're going to render. Now once I've got my camera view set, I can go back to render properties, and I click in here, I make sure my output's set, and then I can do general here and make sure that I've got start frame 0 in frame 120, and that's all you need to know for right now. And then we'll close that, and like I said, you select your folders already selected, and you can hit render frame, and it's just going to render out a single image. And if I go to continue, then you can actually come here and go save RGB A and save it as a PNG, or there's 1,000 choices, a JPEG or something like that, if you wanted like just a still frame of your image. And one last thing, if you hit D on the keyboard, you'll want to come to CS for color space. And right now I'm not in the right, everything's in linear, and that's not what I want. So to be in the correct color space for everything, just go to quick preset, and since you're on a computer monitor, more than likely you hit sRGB, and that'll put you in the correct color space 95% of the time. And so now we're in the correct color space. So everything was kind of a little wonky there because we were in linear, but now we're in the correct color space. So now if I go to render frame, I can render out a frame, hit continue, go to file, and I can save it out as a single frame, as a PNG or a JPEG. I can kill that if I don't want to do that. And then if I want to render out my animation, all I've got to do is go render scene, and I usually say yes, that's correct, and I turn off the render display. Yes, I always say yes, and then it'll do its thing. Now wait, I see my perspective is off here, so I guess maybe this is good. We're having a little mistake, because that tells me that I moved something incorrectly. So let me abort that. So somehow, some way, I have an extra frame in here, and you see what I did at some point. I don't know when I did it. I inadvertently moved the camera. So this is undoubtedly will happen to you. So all we got to do is you can see your keyframes down here on the timeline. So that's a keyframe, and that's a keyframe, and this is on for the camera. So what I got to do is I got to come down here to the keyframe. I don't want this keyframe. I just hit delete. It's going to ask me, do I want to delete this keyframe? And I just say yes. And now it's in the camera's in the proper position. But if I want the keyframe in the beginning for the camera to just be stay put, I really don't want this keyframe here, but I would prefer to have it at the 0. You just click here, you double click on the keyframe up here on the top between the two lines, and then I can just click on this keyframe and drag it back to the beginning. So now if I want to go back to the beginning of how this will appear, I can just come over to here in the lower right to these controls, hit that, and then you have all the player controls right here. You just hit play, and there's our spinning box. So now that I've checked the animation, which I probably should have done in the very beginning before I went to render it, I should have check played it. There it is. So these are your player controls. Now that I see the animation, I'm in camera view, all I'd have to do is just hit render scene. And now the whole thing's going to render out. So if you mistakenly you do something like I just did and you make a mistake, and undoubtedly you'll make mistakes, you just go abort. I guess that's not the best terminology, but abort. So, but then you can go back and fix whatever you did wrong. So when you're animating stuff, you just have to be careful that you didn't introduce additional keyframes. If you did, just go back on wherever the problem was. Like in this case, it was in this scene right now, the only thing that's really animated is the box. So there should just be that initial keyframe and this keyframe. But if you inadvertently move an object like the camera, it may have keyframes on there you don't want. So you have to just, like I said, just delete those. And that's all I had. I just wanted to give you a quick introduction into LightWave. Then when these all these images render out, just take them into your video editing software. And like I use Vegas Pro, you may use Adobe or whatever you use, Final Cut, and just it has usually a feature in there for assembling those PNG sequences into a clip. But I always render out PNG sequences for animation. I never use AVIs inside of LightWave or anything like that. Always just render out in a PNG sequence. And that is all. So I don't know if there's only 7 people in the world that are just starting out with LightWave, but this video is for you if you are. It really is a great program. Once you get past all just these initial things in the beginning, there's a lot of little gotchas. And like with any 3D program, it just takes some practice. But I wanted to show you how to create something kind of quick that might inspire you to keep going on your LightWave journey. So anyway, take care, have a great day, and I will talk to you next time.